Hello, welcome to my channel. We have a Star Wars drawing today, Darth Vader, and a while back I did a drawing of one of the Nazgul from the Lord of the Rings in a similar technique because I also used this dark matte Fabriano paper and white charcoal and soft charcoal, but here I also decided to use some pastel pencils for the details in color. So I hope you'll like it, and I'm going to take you through the drawing process. Let's have a look. So I'm going to be using a white charcoal pencil. This is a Kohinoor Gioconda charcoal pencil. And I don't know exactly what this white charcoal pencil is made of. I do know that it's pretty good for creating highlights on toned paper. It's not super sharp because the tip broke off a couple of times. Maybe my sharpener wasn't sharp enough. But this is the best I could, and now I'm doing the outline of the helmet, which is going to be almost completely white. The helmet is black, but it's very reflective, so there are some very light areas in it. Now this area here needs to be a little bit darker, kind of grayish in appearance, and that's why I went over it with a white charcoal pencil, and then I softened it with a brush. I can do the same thing with the Tortillion if I feel like I need a little more precision. But the point is to create a nice range of value so that the helmet would start to appear more 3D, like it has volume. And like I said, this is a Kohinoor Gioconda white charcoal pencil. One of the reasons why I like using it is because these whites that I produce with it really stick and stand out, and when you spray it with a fixative, it doesn't blend into the background. Because I tried using white chalk as well, and I wasn't really happy with the way it performed. First of all, white charcoal is a lot whiter, and also when you spray it with a fixative, white chalk tends to become even darker and kind of sinks into the surface of the paper if the paper is darker. That doesn't seem to happen with this white charcoal as much. Now, as you can see, I covered some of the areas with regular charcoal, and I used a woodless charcoal pencil, a soft charcoal pencil. The reason why I am using a soft charcoal pencil for these darkest areas is because the paper is already pretty dark, and I don't think that the medium charcoal pencil would show up against it, so a soft one is really showing up, and because it's a lot darker, well, not a lot darker, but it's somewhat darker, and it's showing up against this paper nicely. So it's allowing me to create a bigger range of value, which is very important if you want to create a realistic looking drawing. Now the drawing that I'm doing is not super large. The paper is about 10 times 14 inches, but I'm not going to cover the whole paper. I just want to draw a sort of a vignette. So because the figure of Vader is not going to be too large, I don't really have much room to maneuver when it comes to these smaller details on the helmet. I'm just going to try to do the best I can in terms of accuracy, but I'm kind of limited by the size. If I were doing a larger portrait of Vader and doing a larger drawing of his helmet, I would be able to put in a lot more detail and it would be a lot more accurate. But this way I'm just going to focus on the main parts and kind of try to make it look as good as I can. So basically I'm doing two things. I'm drawing lighter areas with a white charcoal pencil, and I'm drawing darkest areas with a soft charcoal pencil. And I'm creating the midtones by adding a bit of white charcoal and then smudging it and blending it so that it becomes kind of grayish. So I've pretty much done with the helmet, and now I'm going to move on to the rest of his body and his equipment. He's going to be holding up his left hand like he's using the force to maybe choke somebody, and he's going to be holding the lightsaber in the other hand. And because I wanted the lightsaber to be red, I decided to add a touch of color to my drawing, even though I think it would look pretty good even in black and white, but I decided to add a touch of color. So in addition to charcoal, white and black charcoal, I'm also going to be using some pastel a little bit later. But the key to making this helmet and the rest of his gear look really reflective, like it's made of metal, is to create these high contrast areas, especially these lighter areas where it appears like the metal is shining, and in order to do that you need high contrast and very sharp transitions between areas of lighter and darker value. So now I'm going to move on to the hand here, and my pencil is not super sharp. This was the best I could do, unfortunately, but I'm going to try to refine some of the shapes using my blending tools and erasers as well. So if I make some mistakes or make something a little bit bigger or thicker than it ought to be, I can fix that using erasers. And now that I drew the outline, the lighter part of the outline of the hand, I'm adding some darker areas with a soft charcoal pencil. Basically the shadow areas. So it's important to have a range of value, otherwise the whole drawing would end up looking flat. And this happens very often on black paper when you work with white on black. So it's important to understand that you need midtones and that you need a nice range of value. So here I'm going to do the best I can to fix the shape of this hand. I'm trying to make it look like an open hand with fingers slightly bent inwards. So I hope that I'll be able to convey that to the viewer, because the drawing, like I said, is not too large, so I don't really have much room to draw something super realistic. But I think as long as you can achieve nice contrast between larger areas of lighter and darker value, the drawing will end up being realistic. And these portions of the sleeve are a little bit lighter, so the part that is kind of on the inside, on the lower side of the arm, is darker because it's facing away from the light source, which is clearly coming from above. So now here, I don't really know all the details here. I'm just going to do the best I can based on my reference photo. He has some kind of electronic equipment on his body, and the first thing that I'm going to do is just draw the darker areas in between all these objects, and also between the folds on the clothes. So once I draw in these darker areas, it'll be easier for me to move on to the midtones and the highlights. Sometimes you can start working from lighter areas to darker areas, sometimes you can go the other way around, but whichever suits you best in that particular moment, I think. And I'm also softening the darker areas a little bit with a brush. Now I'm going to move on to the other arm and the hand holding that lightsaber. I can't see too much detail there. I just know that at least a few fingers there need to be visible. The whole drawing is kind of dark. It's supposed to be that way. That's one of the reasons why I picked this toned paper. Now a few words on what I'm doing with the saber. By the way, I'm not going to be using a ruler. I can straighten that out a little bit later, but if it's not perfect, sorry about that. I'm going to try to make it look as straight as possible. But anyway, even though the lightsaber is red, in order to make it look like it's glowing, I need to first do the middle part, which is lighter, and then I'm gonna create this glowing effect around it by spreading a little bit of white charcoal, but I'm not gonna make it as white as the middle part, the saber itself. So I'm just drawing the glowing effect around the saber, and I'm pretty much gonna leave the middle area almost completely white, and then I'm going to cover the glowing area around the saber with some red pastel, and hopefully that'll get the job done. So I also added a little bit of white chalk on the edges to see if I could create a smoother transition, even though, like I said, I prefer using white charcoal. And here I'm going to move on to the hand and the glove, and I'm also adding some lighter details on this equipment on his body. So because his clothes and gear is made mostly of metal and leather, we have a lot of these high contrast areas, so these highlights are very important, and that's why this white charcoal pencil is so useful. Now here around the saber I decided to shade this part of his robe a little bit more with a white charcoal pencil, as you can see, so that it would look like the lightsaber is casting some light onto that part of his clothes. And here I'm adding some green buttons and stuff like that, and the way to make them look shiny is I first draw the green part, and then I can put the lighter white dot or whichever shape inside that green area, and that kind of makes it look like it's glowing, like a shiny button or something like that. The green becomes a little bit less visible, but it's still there. So we're going to have a few of these switches and buttons here as well. I'm going to be also adding a little bit more of that green pastel there, and some more switches there. So I don't need to put too much detail in there. I'm just going to emphasize these folds in the clothes a little bit so that they stand out, and also some shadows on the sleeve and in between the arms around the sides of the body. I haven't done that many Star Wars drawings for my channel here, but I've done a lot of commissioned Star Wars drawing before I started recording for YouTube. And those were mostly commissions, but I'm not a great fan of Star Wars, because the truth is I only really enjoyed the original trilogy. I thought that the prequels were kind of unnecessary, and I thought that pretty much everything that followed those in recent times was usually not very good. Movies are not very good nowadays. So you can see how I'm doing this shading with a red pastel here. I created that glowing effect around the saber, but I also added a little bit of that red pastel onto the robe as well, as you can see, and on the hand holding the saber. I want it to look like this glowing red light is also shining onto his clothes and the hand. Now I'm just going over the white part very, very lightly. I don't want to subdue that highlight, I want it to stand out, but I'm just trying to make it a little bit more reddish. I'm pretty much done with the hardest, most complicated bits here, but I'm just gonna clean up some of these edges and move on to the rest of the clothes and complete my vignette, because I'm not going to draw all the way to the edge of the paper. I'm just going to make it look like his robe is fluttering, flying to one side. And I'm just going to add a little bit of value to the lower part of that robe and the clothes using the soft charcoal pencil, and I'm going to spread that with a soft brush. And hopefully that'll give me the effect I want. Just a few more lighter details on the belt. So this is not an overly complicated drawing, but as you can see, on toned paper, if you use white charcoal in a combination with black charcoal, and if you create a nice range of value, the drawing can really pop out of the paper. What I'm doing here is just adding a little bit of white charcoal to some of these folds on the clothes and softening them with a brush. I'm trying to make everything look a little more 3D, trying to add a little more depth to his figure and to the clothes. I'm going to add a little more red here to make it look like this red light is glowing, and that's why the rest of the clothes around it is also red. I feel like I need a touch more red here as well. So that's pretty much it when it comes to red pastel, just a few touches. I think the saber looks pretty good, and I didn't really have to put too much detail into the hand holding it, which is good because I can't really make out much in my reference photo. So I'm just putting down some finishing touches, polishing the edges just a little bit and cleaning it up. And the drawing is now pretty much done. I'm going to sign it with that white charcoal pencil, and I'm going to put my signature in the lower right corner to make the drawing more balanced, because that saber is sticking out on the left side, and I'm going to put my signature on the right side. So that's it. I hope you enjoyed this process of drawing Darth Vader on this dark paper. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.